God of the universe, maker of the stars, who am I that you would know my name?
You tried to get me, didn't you?
I did.
You did.
I see, I
hello,
did.
everyone. You did. Oh, yeah. And now I'm like, even though I see the thing that says recording, I'm like, oh dear, are we recording or not?
Daniel,
Welcome, everyone.
Daniel, I've trained you better than that. If it says recording, it means recording. Okay, it's not a trick. Okay.
Yeah, but you know what? Sometimes, like, you just enter this state in your mind where even when everything lines up and makes sense, it
Oh,
still doesn't click.
oh, is that like a segue to something?
You know, it very well could be. Entirely 100% intentionally. Yes,
Ah,
it is.
oh,
And
very
that is
good.
not true, but we'll go with it.
Okay. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good. Pretty good. I'm just waiting for you
Yeah,
to, kind of get the program going.
yeah, no. Well, I was trying to say welcome everyone
Yeah,
to episode number 67
there you go.
of Life on Purpose.
Mhm.
You are here with me and Top Dog, and it's us.
Yeah,
And if you're curious why
and the
it's just
puppy.
us, I'm just not gonna tell you. I'm just gonna say you're gonna have to listen to last week's episode and go for it that way.
Mm-hmm. And then they will
But
find out everything that we know.
and they'll find out that that's not actually that much.
It's true. Maybe so. Okay, so what are we talking about tonight?
Well, um, sense. We're talking about sense and
Making sense
nonsense
or
and making
nonsense or
sense
dollars and cents?
and making nonsense.
Okay.
Yes, dollars and cents.
Okay.
No, this is a unique week where usually we have something like
Mm-hmm.
there's some kind of, even if it's a single word, it's something to go off of. But this week, me and you were both just like drawn crickets. There was
Mm-hmm.
nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then last minute, you texted me and said, "Okay, when God doesn't make sense."
Yeah.
And so here I am. You know, you said ready, set, stop, and then you push the record button, and that's what threw me for a total loop. And here I am, literally, I'm looking at you. I can see that it says recording, and I know we're recording,
Mm-hmm.
but because of the events surrounding that moment, I was like, is this actually happening? And I just feel like that could go somewhere right there.
Hmm. So even though we see and we know that something is in front of us, we're trying to figure out, okay, what is God doing at times? And it's like,
Mhm.
what is he trying to, is he speaking, or is he silent, or have I done something wrong, or have I committed the immortal sin? Um, what is happening? I'm praying. Today you and I were both kind of, going back and forth. It's like nothing. And then it's like, what about when he's silent? What about when he doesn't make sense? And then I started thinking about it a little bit in the 3.5 minutes I had before we started the program, of all the stuff that's going on in scripture. Like, this
Mhm.
week, okay, as we're recording on Tuesday night, as I talked to everybody on Life on Purpose on this past Shabbat, it was last night, Monday night, that Yeshua would have had, I think from the timeline I got, Yeshua would have had the meal at the house of Lazarus
Mhm.
with Mary and Martha. I mean, talk about not making sense. Okay, they get
Yeah.
word to him that Lazarus is dead, and so what does he do? He delays 4 days, and then the disciples say, "But he's dead." He said, "No, he's sleeping." Well, wait a minute. We were told.
Mhm.
What are you doing? Uh, you pulled one on me on Shabbat. I mean, you started singing this song of it's out of the book of Job. Um, you give and take away.
Mhm.
Blessed be your name. I mean, if anybody had a moment of God doesn't make sense, it's Job. I mean, that
Mhm.
boy is like mixed up in what's happening in
Yeah.
his life. And it was like, blessed be your name. It, Sometimes the only thing that we have in our life is blessed be your name.
That's true. It is. That's a deep, profound truth that I think only gets more deep and more profound the older you get. My wife and I, Catesby and I, were talking about Ecclesiastes a couple days ago,
Oh
and
yeah,
how
light reading there.
how much, yeah, exactly, but how much more we come to appreciate that book as we
Hmm.
do get older and as we do walk through more experience,
Hmm.
because it's hard to draw from the truths of that book as a teenager, as
Mm,
someone who hasn't experienced much. it's
yeah.
it's just like you read it and you're like, wow, that's depressing. And as you start to grow, as you start to mature, as you start to understand more, you're like, you know what, it kind of is depressing, but, and you just start to understand like what Solomon is saying. And it's so fascinating to me that all the life that he lived, everything that he went through, all of the, he essentially came to the end of his life and said, none of this makes sense.
Hmm.
And so here's what I'm going to do, the most simple thing possible. And what is the most simple thing possible in our walk that we could do? Blessed be your name.
Yeah. Here's a guy, you talk about Solomon. I mean, this man had everything. Okay. He
Mhm.
made a political figure of today. He made Donald Trump look like a homeless man under a bridge. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much.
you know, the boy he was a multi-billionaire. He was into to stables and horses. He was into chariots. He was into buildings. He was into pretty much everything you can imagine. And at the end of his life, he said, it's all worthless and pointless. And the
Mhm.
only thing that really matters in the end is serving God.
Yeah, it's, he made the point a couple times: eat and drink, enjoy the work of your hands.
Hmm.
Toward the end, he said, pursue the Torah, pursue the commandments of God, for this is the purpose of a man. Um, and so as we see that things don't make sense, I think it becomes more important maybe to draw from the things that are the most simple.
Mm,
Because let's face it, if we try to make sense out of this life, we are going to pull our hair out and we're going to go crazy, because it doesn't help. It doesn't help to think of the problems and dwell on them and talk about all of them. It makes sense. It is beneficial to, no matter what is in front of you, say, blessed be your name.
hmm.
And to use a recent example, another another conversation Catesby and I were having a couple days ago. So if you're watching this program, you probably have a love for Israel. If you have a love for Israel, you probably understand that there was a recent attack on
Hmm.
Israel from Iran.
Hmm.
Hundreds of drones, various kinds of missiles, and a 99% success rate
Yeah.
of thwarting that attack from the enemy. And here I am over here, me thinking from my worldly perspective. I am fighting mad,
Mm,
absolutely atrociously angry at the country in which I live, and so conflicted, because I do believe very deeply that we are to seek the good of the place we live.
hmm.
We are to grow where we are planted. We are to, um, live our lives today as we look forward to tomorrow. That is a part of everything, and we have
Hmm.
to be that way. We have to be invested. However, we understand that this life is temporal, and we have to look to the eternal things. And Israel is an eternal thing. The people of Israel are an eternal thing. And so, but here I am, like, watching the absolute cowardice of our government. As, yes, they pitched in and
Mm.
shot down some drones and some missiles. Okay, I am thankful for that. God can use a donkey too. um, so
Literally.
but he literally, yeah, he said that's
Yeah.
pretty appropriate.
Mm.
Um, but I just found myself getting more and more angry of how can you be so stupid? How can you be so immoral and weak and cowardly to not take a firm stance on this? And here I am thinking from my worldly perspective.
Mhm.
And it's one thing to know that all nations will turn against Israel, but it's
Yeah.
another thing to know it.
And to
And
watch it.
here I am, and to watch it and to not get involved in it in the wrong way. And so here I am, just absolutely having a horrible day and probably not being a pleasant person to people I was around. And here Catesby is reminding me, God is the one who defends them. They don't
Yeah.
need anyone else.
Yeah.
And to hear that in that moment was upsetting, but also just it set the truth in me
Yeah.
that I and you, I know you've talked about this and I've talked about this, I've said it, but it hit in a new way to really understand, to pray that America would stand with Israel is to pray against the will of God. To pray that America would stand with Israel is to pray against the restoration of all things,
Yeah.
because what is happening right now is hopefully Israel casts off the chains that are pinning them down from foreign countries and realize God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the one who is our shield, and we need to please him and no one else.
Mhm. You know, I brought up Psalm 83 on Shabbat, and
Mhm.
that, basically that is summarizing what you just said, because it calls out the nations that are going to be coming against Israel. And it is a prayer. You can, somebody can pray Psalm 83 over this whole situation, but the essence of it is, look to the hills from where your salvation comes from. Look up, for your redemption draws near. All of this is about looking up into the heavens, into that realm, and consider, instead of, because here's what tends to happen. Okay, and I'm talking from personal experience here, is that when things happen around us or to us, and we're a part of that, and it doesn't make sense, we somehow, or I somehow, I won't put everybody in there, but if if the shoe fits, okay, put it
Yeah.
on and make sure it's tied. Um, but there's this tendency to force something
Mhm.
instead of sitting back, and this doesn't mean we go through life with inaction. Okay. That's the other extreme to this, is inaction, but
Mhm.
understanding that the Father has a greater something. Let me take you back. We're coming up on a anniversary together.
Mhm.
We're coming up on May 10th, which is mine and your mom and you, our anniversary, 2010, 14 years ago.
14
That
years, yeah.
Yeah, that a tornado went over the top of our house. Now that's the story up front, but here's the
Mhm.
backstory. That that what was the joke about, there's a storm coming and dad's not home?
Well, every time something major would happen, whether it was an ice storm, a snowstorm, a health problem, even, you were out traveling.
Yeah, I'm somewhere.
Just kinda,
And it's
yeah.
like it was a bad joke, right? And
Mhm.
so this was during the time in which my mother was, of blessed memory, was going through some changes mentally, and so I was going to be moving her from her house in Jacksonville to an apartment. I'd been there, I'd taken her to the apartment, we had gone through it, we had filled out the paperwork, everything. I came back home to Oklahoma and was getting ready to get in my truck and leave to go and move her out of her apartment. This would have been a couple, 3 days ahead of that, of May 10th. And I get a phone call from the apartment complex that said, "There's a problem with your mother's credit." I'm like, "What? My mother doesn't have problems with her credit. She's paid everything off. There's no issue." "Well, sir, there's a problem with her credit, and we're not going to be able to prove this. And since it's Friday afternoon, you know, nothing can be done until Monday." It's like, okay, well, why did that happen? Because on Monday afternoon, we had a tornado go over our house. And if it had not been for that credit glitch, which was a total mistake, it was not even something that should have been there in any way, shape, or form, I would have been
Yeah.
gone.
Mhm.
Blessed be his name. And I can
Yeah.
go through as you can. If you have something to a story to share about that, go for it. I can go through and give examples until episode number 167 of things that have happened in my life like that.
Yeah, and I had forgotten completely about that very important aspect of that, whether or not I even knew it or was aware of it, because I was obviously a teenager in my own world. But
Literally, you
yeah,
were a
and I was,
teenager in your own world, and it was because of that that you chose which world to be in.
yeah, that's true, and I don't find it a coincidence at all that, um, there was something that's the year I met Catesby at Camp
Hmm.
Yeshua.
Hmm.
And there was something that was going to prevent us. There was something we were closing on a priest property or something, so you weren't able to be there that year, but I was able to make it, thankfully,
Hmm.
thankfully. Um, but again, that was a situation that could have withheld me from going, and that's one of many. And I was thinking right before the podcast that how sad it is, and I try to get better about this as I continue my walk with the Father. Um, but it's so sad that it's so much easier to question Him and say, God, things don't make sense right now in the bad times, when things are hard, when it's much easier to say, God, things don't make sense when the credit glitch is happening, rather than in the moment when you realize, oh, I'm here for this now.
Hmm.
Um, or just those good moments, like, and again, I try to get better about this, but I just feel like that's true. I think human tendency is toward the negative generally, and it's harder, especially with God. Like, we're like down in the dumps, and we're praying and we're crying out to Him, and He saves us from it, He brings us through it, and we thank Him for a moment, and then we're off doing it again, and just kind of forgetting a lot of the times. um, but it's true, there's so many times in our lives when things like that happen, and it's like, that doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
It doesn't make sense that you were able to be there for that one. It doesn't make sense for uh, these 10 things to have lined up for this situation to have worked out perfectly. I mean, God can really make things line up in such a way that do not make sense, and that no human could ever have orchestrated for Him to bring about good things in our lives too. And yeah, that's just one of many, many examples.
Well, let's consider this week. Okay. We're both preparing for Passover. And with that, we probably will not have a program next week. You're going to have
Mhm.
company coming in, and so we're going to put our focus on to Passover, which for us will be Monday night. Um, but let's go back 2,000 years, not even to Egypt, okay, for 2,000 years earlier, but 2,000 years ago, you've got a group of disciples that have given their whole life. They've given over 3 years probably of their lives to this man who is walking around the Sea of Galilee and says, leave your fishing. I spoke in Southern there. Leave your fishing business and follow me. leave your mom and dad, leave your family, leave your job, leave everything behind. Matthew, the tax collector, leave your government pension, leave it all behind and follow me. Well, for what? I'm not going to tell you. Just follow me. Okay. And they do. And so they give their whole lives to him for 3.5 years. Monday night is the observance of approximately 2,000 years ago that they were gathered there around that execution stake watching him die.
Mhm.
He doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense. We gave our whole life to this, and there he is. He's dead. D-E-A-D, dead. He is buried in a tomb. One of the disciples goes and hangs himself. And he's not resurrected the next morning. It's 3 days and 3 nights. Imagine, as you have, I know, because we've talked about this, imagine the despair that those men and women, including his mama, were going through
Mhm.
for 3 days and 3 nights. See, they hadn't read the book.
Yeah.
They hadn't read that he was going to. Hey guys, don't worry, he's going to raise again. No, they had heard it, but they didn't hear it.
Mhm. Yeah, they had heard it, and even so much to say it wasn't for them to have heard yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like part of that despair was part of what they had to go through to be who they needed to be on the other side of it. And that's true. And I think what we're really talking about here is something we've talked about many times on the program, of shifting our focus and our perspective to not our own, but to the Father's, because he's always, 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 always working for our good
Mm-hmm.
and caring for us and doing things that let me go a slightly different direction. I remember hearing someone talk recently about how when something bad, quote unquote bad, happens to them these days, they very, very rarely ever even give the enemy a thought, a single thought,
Mm.
because he just doesn't deserve that much credit. Because
I like that.
God, no, really, like there are times for sure for understanding that we are in a spiritual battle,
Yeah.
and that there are two sides to it, and that the enemy is always working relentlessly to be against us. But as much as the enemy is against us and trying to thwart our every effort to be righteous in God's eyes, God is unequivocally more able to destroy anything the enemy wants to do. Truly, like in the story of Job, nothing can come to you from the enemy himself without the permission of God.
Mm-hmm.
And just to understand that, to dwell on that idea that anything that happens to you, we have to grow through trials and tribulation. It's very hard for lessons to be deeply seated in our hearts without it being attached to some kind of work, some kind of trial, some kind of suffering. And it's how we define those words. Like, suffering maybe should not necessarily make us think of negative things. Trials should not necessarily be a negative thing when we understand that every single thing that we go through, every single thing that happens on this earth is able to be, if not directly a result of God's doing, it is able to be plucked by God to be used for the best part of us. And so what this person was trying to say is, a bad day comes along, someone's sick, someone dies, something happens, business is slow, any of those kind of things, insert whatever you want. why would we first go to the enemy?
Hmm.
Why would we not first go to the Father
Yeah.
and say, "Blessed be your name," and ask him for peace, for one, for comfort, and then, what do you wish to accomplish through this, God? And then he might tell you, you are being attacked by the enemy, and
Mhm.
you need to learn authority, and you need to learn to stand up for yourself against the darkness. But I think that was the point. Why go to the enemy first? Go to the Father first.
I like that. I mean, something comes into your life. We should not ask, what is Satan doing, but we should ask, what is the Father doing? Because,
Mhm.
like with Job, I mean, going back to him, and I know that Job is a there's a lot of stuff in there in that book.
Sure.
There's
Yeah, there
there's a
is.
lot of science. There's some amazing science, really in there. But Job was the first book I ever taught through when I started teaching. In a I was actually teaching a Sunday school class, but there was a group of men, and the older men, and I'm the one that decided to put together a men's group. I was half the age of all of them. Boy, how things change. And and so I opened up, and I'm going, okay, I'm going to teach through Job. Really? Uh, I taught through a few chapters, and that's when me and your mom ended up moving from that church to a different church. It's like, what's going on here? And I came to the men's group the next week, and I said, guys, this is what's happening. So I'd like to just summarize the book, because I'm not going to be here to finish it. So let's summarize it. And John Faust, of you know of him very well.
Mhm.
John turned to some of the last chapters, and it says in one of the last chapters of Job, I have heard of you with my hearing, but now I've seen you face to face.
Mhm.
The whole thing, the whole encounter that Job went through of losing his children, losing everything, was so he could see the face of the Almighty. Not just
Mhm.
have heard of him, but have seen him. Is that crisis of faith you and I have talked about in the past?
And I will never ever forget in my entire life that one of the most difficult things that I ever went through was preceded immediately, days before the very trip, by me reading a portion of The Cost of Discipleship by
Yeah,
Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And it is a tough read, so much so that I have never made it past page 20, probably,
yeah.
in my attempts to read it.
I haven't
But
either,
I
by the
got
way.
far enough. Yeah. I got far enough to read the one line that the Father needed me to read,
Mhm.
that I didn't remember it until later, that he said, God will not use a man greatly until he has hurt him deeply.
Yeah, it is doubtful
So
that God
I
will
would
use.
personally use
Yeah,
the
you cut
wording.
out a little bit there, so let me put in that one on my side. It is doubtful that God will use a man greatly until he has hurt him deeply. Boy, that goes against
Mhm.
a lot of theology today, doesn't it?
Goodness gracious, it does, and you were right on track with what I was thinking. Because I understand why you would use that wording to begin with, but I do think it is better suited when you change it around a little bit, um, because God. Well, I won't say that because no man can really know God.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I will say, um, uh, I'm trying to get my train of thought back after losing signal here. It's like the computer signal got lost and my brain signal got lost.
You got a little bit on your plate there.
Here's what I'm trying to say. I think, yeah, a little bit. Um, God, it is. mm, okay, I'll use your first part. It is doubtful that God will use a man greatly until God has had the chance to put him back together again after being hurt deeply.
Wow.
Because no matter what happens to be hurt deeply, God is the one that is like right there, wanting, desiring, like raring to go to put you back together again. And it is after that, and is after that trial of faith, after being put through that fire and understanding he's still good and saying, "Blessed be your name." And that is, man, that's what should really separate us from the world, because everyone experiences suffering. Everyone
Oh, yeah.
experiences hardship. There's no person on this planet that's immune to it, from the biggest of the billionaires to the, the homeless person on the streets. Every single person is able to suffer. And so what should really separate us from the world is being able to go through suffering and still say, "Blessed be your name."
What a great gift. I mean, you think about that. I did some stuff on my Living Torah program this morning out of the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. And it's, let's see, Leviticus 14, verse 34, where it says, when you enter the land and I put this thing called zarat or leprosy in your house. I put it there? He put it there? Really? I mean, when you stop and really think about it, that's the incredible love that he has for us. That he would put something in front of us in order to test us, in order to refine us. And it's an interesting word. Let me get it back here in my notes here. The word "I put" in, and again, people can go to Leviticus 14:34, is ani natan, which is in Hebrew is a nun, a tav, and a final nun. The letter nun is life. The tav is a letter for the covenant, and a final nun is, I could say, eternal life. So this reminded me of John 10:10. I have come that they may have life and life abundantly. Or maybe we could translate into, I have come that they might have life and life eternal.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm around people a lot, I'm sure you are, that go through trials and they don't see God anywhere.
And okay, let's see if I can piece this together in my head. For one, the older I get, the more I'm amazed that anyone can function at all properly, because I mean, truly, we are in a fallen world, and we all have human parents. That's something we all have in common, which means we all have a imperfect upbringing. And so we all have we all have ancestral baggage, generational baggage, things that past generations that we don't know of that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so for one, I just find it amazing that any of us can really function properly.
Yeah.
But the place that I was actually trying to go is, we're talking about like really seeing his perspective. We're talking about really coming to a place where we can look beyond the things in front of us to the eternal and say, "Blessed be your name." And it's making me think how I was having another conversation with my lovely wife about communication. And we tend to be pretty good at it, me and her. And I mean, we've just she's very forward and I'm very reserved. And so like we've constantly been pulling things out of each other, and as a marriage should be. And so she makes me more bold, which is definitely something I needed in my life. She really encourages me in that way. But we were talking about communication the other day, and I realized that we talk about communication and how important it is in a marriage a lot. Like that is one of the most key things in a successful marriage is communication.
Yeah.
But I realized there's so many people out there who are talking to each other about issues, about important issues in their marriage, but they aren't communicating. And in the same way, we can come to God in these tough times,
Gotcha.
and we can talk to him, without communicating with him.
Yeah.
Because what is talking about issues? It's saying, I don't like this, and you don't like this. So I'll stop. You should stop doing that, and I'll think about stopping doing that. It's essentially you're putting out your desires only. This person's putting out their desires and their annoyances only. But it's not until you realize, okay, we are a team. We are supposed to be one. This is no longer about what do I want and what do you want. This is about how do we come together and how do we become one and how do we meld our desires to where it's no longer even what I want and what you want, but what we want. That is communication.
So I guess it could be said that instead of talking with him, it is the tendency to talk at him.
Mhm.
And this is something that I've tried to deal with in ministry to young adults, to youth, is to not talk at them, but to talk with them. And I've found that young adults and youth have a lot to say, but the vast majority, and please correct me if I'm off base here, which I know you will because Catesby is giving you that boldness. Um, the vast majority of our youth, I think, in this movement, this may be in religion as a whole, maybe in society as a whole, don't feel like people are talking with them, but are just talking at them.
Mhm.
So if we're not able to communicate in this earthly realm with each other by talking with people, how can we possibly expect to be able to talk into a spiritual realm with our Creator and get anywhere if all we're doing is one person yakking?
And is that not like part of the essence of the Ten Commandments, where it's broken down where the first five are people call it like vertical and
Yeah,
horizontal, but
yeah,
essentially it's saying the first five are between you and God,
yeah.
and the second five are between you and your fellow man.
Hmm.
And it seems rather important then that he would include five very straightforward and rather simple things in the 10 words, the
Hmm.
10 commandments, that and how we would relate with each other, because he is the creator. He is the one who brought forth everything that we see and we enjoy and is surrounding us. He is the mind and the architect of it all. And we are so far beneath him, and our our minds that he created cannot fathom him at all. And so he made us for each other and with each other. And so if we can't communicate and dwell with the very people that he created so that we could dwell together and learn how to be together, how on earth would we be able to push our minds beyond that? And really, it's not until we love one another, and he desires us to show other people who don't know how to understand him.
Hmm.
He wants us to show them his love through us, because that's the first way you start to understand him without, very specific and special circumstances that he really reaches into a person's life immediately. Most of the time, it's through other people.
Well, let's look at a verse here. I'm not going to go over to it. People can look at this later on. Matthew chapter 18. It says, if you have something again, if you bring your gift to an altar, okay, we don't have an altar, we don't have a sacrifice. So what is this? Is if you bring yourself to a place of prayer, let's just put it real simple. And as you're beginning this prayer, you remember something that you have been offended by someone. You've, there's something in a relationship that's not right. It says Well, let me paraphrase what he's saying. Before you talk to me, get up and go talk to them. Okay, that's the Mike Clayton version. Before you talk to me, go talk to them. And so, but of course, that's not that, you know, that's not for me because of X, you know, because of whatever. Always making up, you know, well, I was offended, but I didn't talk to them because of, you know, because of whatever. So, you know, making excuses for things in whatever it may be, making excuses for our
Mhm.
relationships in this horizontal will give way to making us having us make excuses in the vertical,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, you know, we've lost the blessed be his name.
Mhm. And there's something so huge, like I cannot stress how huge it is to the brutal honesty of it. You're describing something's coming to your head of an offense with someone you know,
Mhm.
and that comes to your head, and it's real. It's a real thing. It's a real feeling. It's a real thing that happened. There was a real event that caused those feelings, but it's important for us to not make excuses about it. It's important to say, God, I understand that you brought that to my head right now, and I understand that that is blocking my relationship with you. But oh my goodness, I don't know how to do this.
Mhm.
That is so much better than saying, "Oh no, no, that's not a I mean, I
That
forgave
couldn't
them,
be
you
it.
know,
Yeah.
we're good. It's
Yeah.
totally fine. I mean, it's not like I would run away if I saw them or anything, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, but you
No,
know,
there is something beautiful and necessary about that honesty of just saying, you know what, God, I know that this is a block between me and you. I just don't know how to deal with it, and I really,
yeah.
really need your help. Like that is God loves that. He can work with that. He can
Mhm.
work with that honesty when we reach to that point in ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And to tell him, you know, back to our original, we kind of got a few other places, but you know, when we don't understand something, it's no surprise to him for us to tell him that. You know, I mean, you know, when something comes about, and you and I know some, you know, we've got some things going on right now that we're like, I don't understand this. I don't.
Mhm.
And I've been, you know, prayed about it. I've talked at him. I've tried to talk with him, and nothing's changed. And you know, I finally look him, and I don't understand. He goes, "Oh, I didn't know that." No, he knows we don't understand. But when in the end of our understanding, you know, the scripture says, "Do not lean on your own understanding." It
Mhm.
doesn't say that we're not to try to understand, but don't lean on
Yeah.
it. You know, you got somebody that's
Yeah.
you know, when you got somebody that's crippled, what do? They lean on a crutch. Okay, we're to use that that God given thing called understanding as part of the menorah. It's part of Isaiah chapter 11. But when it comes down to it, I'm not leaning on it because that's a crutch that's going to break. And when it breaks, you're going to fall down and it may hurt.
Mhm.
So he upholds us through that. It's a very it's a I guess a difficult thing to learn that balance.
It is, and this is something he's been, I'll say it, pounding into me recently.
Mm,
Is how not important is the wrong word. It's like necessary. How much of a lifeblood it is for us to spend undistracted, devoted time to him.
mhm,
He doesn't care if it's scheduled or not. Like he doesn't care if it's like you have on your day on your schedule every day 8:30 to 8:45 or 8:30 to 8:35. if that's the beginning of it. He doesn't care if it's like really, if you have to put it on your schedule, you're so bad at starting it. I say you and looking at me. Um, but he's been pounding into me that that is my lifeblood.
Mhm.
That without that, I'm incapable of functioning at this point. Like, I run a business, I've got a family, my kids are young, I'm doing all these sorts of things and trying to, we got visions and goals and dreams and working on things, and I cannot function without my daily bread, without leaning into his understanding of what is going on in my life. Because, and he was pressing into me recently too, like, you need this because it's so easy to get caught up with just little things, like the one little worry kind of enters your head about
Mhm.
something that went on that day. One part of the job that goes wrong, and then just one thing here, one thing there, and those things, without him revealing it to us, without spending that time in his peace giving, life giving presence to unveil that stuff and lay our burdens upon him and
Mhm.
give him those, because he desires them. He wants them. He's like,
Yeah.
listen, I know you can't take it. I know
Yeah.
that you cannot bear the things that you're trying to bear right now. Just
Yeah.
give them to me, and I'll take care of it for you. But it's so important, because that's where we get our understanding from. We
Well,
don't get understanding, his heavenly understanding, through osmosis. It doesn't just kind of like rain down upon us when the temperature is right and the barometric pressure is evened out, and
mhm.
it doesn't happen through natural causes. It happens through, ooh, I think we talked about this recently, intentionality.
Ah, yes. And you can do that in so many ways. I mean, it's not like you have to schedule time with him. You driving on the road, turn the radio off. Turn off after you listen to your favorite podcast, Life on Purpose, turn everything else off. Um, I'm kidding, folks. Uh, kind of. Uh, you know, I mean, what's it going to matter if you miss 30 minutes of your favorite talk show? They're going to say the same thing in the next 30 minutes. They don't say anything new every day. So what about, take a time period, instead of you're driving down the road somewhere, decide, I'm going to turn the radio off. I'm going to turn off the, whatever it is media that you're using. I'm just going to use this time now to talk to the Father. I'm going to use this time for prayer. If you're driving, please don't close your eyes when you're doing that. But it says watch and pray. Okay, that's about driving. Uh, but how could life be different if people decide to do some of that? I guarantee you that that Saturday night there was a lot of prayer in Israel as
Mhm.
30 tons of rockets and missiles and drones were launched toward them. As you said, I think there was one person up north that got a little bit of an injury. Other than that, it's one actually a Muslim girl that is critically injured. I haven't seen anything today on that. How do you send 30 tons of explosives and rockets and missiles? And you probably saw the one that was they pulled out of the Dead Sea. The thing's the size of a
Mhm.
small bus,
Yeah.
and nothing hits anybody. Oh, it's because of the Israel Defense Force and the Iron Dome and this dome. No, it's because he who he who keeps Israel doesn't slumber or sleep. And if you and I are in Messiah, the scripture says we're part of Israel. And so we didn't replace, we're part of Israel, the people of Israel, and he doesn't slumber and sleep over us either.
Mhm.
Period.
Period. Amen. And I was reminded this week again, and this will be my closing thought, I think, unless you had other thoughts you had to bring up.
That was mine.
I was reminded yet again. Okay. I was reminded yet again of, it was a good closing thought, by the way, of
Thank you.
the scene from the book that I quoted multiple times, of Piercing the Darkness,
Yeah.
and how there's a scene in there where the the physical enemy, the group, are performing a demonic ritual, and you can see what's happening in the demonic realm as well, as they're like getting excited over all this stuff, and the physical realm is performing this thing to unleash an attack. And sure enough, in the book, like it's all happening at the same time. And I've been thinking about this on and off for the past 6 months, since October 7th, that this idea of an attack on the physical land of Israel is an attack on the people of Israel, the physical people, and
Absolutely.
it is also an attack on the spiritual people of Israel. And so I want to maybe give some people a break in themselves, and just understand that if you were having a bad few days, the last few days, if things seemed extra tense, if you were really agitated and things were just going wrong, understand that as those rockets are being sent to the land of Israel, those rockets are being sent to the spiritual people of Israel.
Yeah.
They are tied. If you are part of Israel, you are tied, and what happens there happens inside of you. And it's important to remember that too, so that we can recognize the battle and be diligent and watchful, like you're saying, and prayerful, and just
Yeah.
understand the tension so that we can be armed and fight against it.
I was feeling that totally on Shabbat. I mean, I said to your mom
Mhm.
later on, I said, when those rockets started flying, I said, this is what I've been feeling all day.
Mhm.
I just I didn't want to be around anybody. Shabbat was coming, I'm the leader of the congregation. I got to show up. Um, I didn't want to, but I knew I needed to, but I knew there was feeling something. I couldn't figure it out. And then when the rocket started to go, I knew what I'd been feeling.
Mhm.
So let's be careful during this time of Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, the counting the omer. Let's be careful that when we're feeling something in the spirit, let's discern it for what it is and try not to take it out on people in the natural.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, um, sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
As we approach this time of Passover, remember that in the Messiah's last hours, he chose not to condemn the people around him who he knew would fail him,
Yeah.
but he chose instead to wash their feet, as he knew the biggest attack that had ever happened was about to happen to him. The full wrath of God unleashed upon him. That was his choice. That's the last thing he
Yeah.
chose to do.
Yeah. And his response to it all was, your will be done, which is
Mhm.
another way of saying, blessed be your name.
Blessed be your name.
Because in that, we might find that there is amazing purposes he has for us, plans for good and not for evil, to give us a future and a hope. And that is because of the work that was done during this Passover season. Until, like I said, we'll be off, we'll probably be gone next week, but God willing, see you in a couple weeks.